The Ocean Ranger disaster remains one of the deadliest offshore drilling accidents in history. What was meant to be a routine operation turned into a nightmare, as a brutal Atlantic storm exposed critical design flaws and a lack of emergency preparedness. This is the story of how 84 men fought for survival and why none of them made it home. The Ocean Ranger, one of the largest semi-submersible oil rigs of its time, faced a brutal test on the night of February 14, 1982. A massive winter storm, fueled by an Atlantic cyclone, relentlessly pounded the rig with towering waves and ferocious winds. The crew, made up of 84 men, fought desperately to maintain stability. However, the storm revealed critical weaknesses in the rig's design and the crew's preparedness. Many of the workers lacked proper emergency training, leaving them ill-equipped to handle the unfolding crisis. Additionally, the rig's automated ballast system, meant to keep it stable, proved vulnerable to flooding and electrical failure. As the situation worsened, panic set in among the crew. What started as a routine storm soon became an all-out battle for survival, exposing the dangerous combination of human and mechanical limitations that would ultimately lead to one of the worst oil rig disasters in history. The Ocean Ranger was operated by ODECO, Offshore Drilling and Exploration Company, and was stationed in the Grand Banks, a well-known oil-rich region in the North Atlantic. Located off the coast of Newfoundland, this area was infamous for its unpredictable and extreme weather, with frequent storms and towering waves that made offshore operations particularly dangerous. Despite these conditions, the oil industry continued to drill in the Grand Banks due to its immense oil reserves. On the night of February 14, 1982, the Ocean Ranger's crew was carrying out routine drilling operations when they received a forecast about an incoming winter storm. While the crew was accustomed to rough seas, this particular storm was far more powerful than expected. However, the culture in the oil industry discouraged delays, forcing the crew to push forward despite the risks. As the storm intensified, it soon became clear that the rig was not as invincible as once believed. When the Ocean Ranger was built, it was considered a marvel of engineering, designed to endure the brutal conditions of offshore drilling. Spanning 396 feet, 121 meters, in length and towering at 337 feet, 103 meters, it was the largest semi-submersible drilling rig ever constructed at the time. Its design incorporated a sophisticated ballast system, which allowed it to remain stable even in rough waters. This system used automated controls to adjust the rig's weight distribution by filling or emptying ballast tanks with seawater. This was intended to keep the rig level during drilling operations and to prevent capsizing. However, the Ocean Ranger's reliance on automation meant that the crew had little experience operating the ballast system manually. In an emergency, this lack of hands-on knowledge would prove to be a fatal flaw. On the night of February 14th, as waves pounded the rig, the ballast system's failure became a turning point in the disaster. The offshore drilling industry operates on tight schedules, where delays can cost companies millions of dollars. This pressure often forces crews to continue working despite dangerous weather conditions. On February 14, 1982, the Ocean Ranger's crew received weather reports warning of a powerful storm approaching the Grand Banks. However, such storms were common in the region, and the crew had faced bad weather before without incident. They remained confident that the rig could handle the storm and saw no reason to halt operations. Unfortunately, the cyclone was much stronger than anticipated, producing waves up to 65 feet high and winds that battered the rig relentlessly. By the time the crew realized the true extent of the storm's danger, it was already too late. The decision to continue drilling, combined with the rig's vulnerabilities, left them in a precarious situation from which there would be no escape. At around 9 p.m., the Ocean Ranger was struck by a massive wave that shattered a port light window, allowing seawater to flood into the ballast control room. This room contained the electrical systems responsible for operating the ballast tanks, which were crucial for keeping the rig stable. As water mixed with the control panels, sparks flew, and circuits shorted out, causing the automated system to malfunction. Suddenly, switches and valves began activating on their own, making it impossible for the crew to regain control. Since the ballast system was designed to function automatically, the crew had never been trained to operate it manually. As a result, they were left helpless as the rig started to list, tilting further into the stormy sea. What had seemed like a minor incident at first quickly escalated into a catastrophic failure. With no way to stabilize the rig, the crew's chances of survival diminished rapidly. As the Ocean Ranger continued to take on water, its list became more pronounced, making movement on board increasingly difficult. By midnight, the situation had spiraled into a full-blown emergency. The crew sent out a distress signal, alerting the Canadian Coast Guard and nearby vessels, including the supply ship Seaforth Highlander. However, the violent storm made rescue efforts nearly impossible. High winds, rough seas, and low visibility prevented rescue boats from reaching the rig safely. Despite their best efforts, the rescuers were forced to watch helplessly as the situation worsened. Meanwhile, the crew on the Ocean Ranger scrambled to find a way to save themselves, but options were dwindling fast. The storm showed no signs of easing, and with no functioning ballast system, the rig was tilting at an increasingly dangerous angle. The men on board knew they were running out of time. As the Ocean Ranger continued to sink, the crew made a desperate attempt to evacuate. They managed to launch a single lifeboat, but the storm's fierce waves made boarding difficult. As the Seaforth Highlander approached, the crew fired distress flares, hoping to be pulled to safety. Tragically, the waves slammed the lifeboat against the side of the rescue vessel, crushing it instantly. Those who had made it into the water were either dragged under by the currents or succumbed to hypothermia. The Seaforth Highlander's crew tried desperately to pull survivors aboard, but the rough seas made it impossible. Not a single crew member from the Ocean Ranger could be saved. The remaining men still on the rig had no way out, and as the structure continued to sink, the realization set in that they would not survive the night. After hours of battling the storm, the Ocean Ranger finally succumbed to the forces of nature. At 3:13 a.m., the massive rig capsized and disappeared beneath the waves, taking all 84 men with it. Despite distress signals and desperate attempts at rescue, no one survived. The once mighty oil rig, thought to be unsinkable, had been completely overtaken by the storm. The loss of the Ocean Ranger was a devastating blow, not only to the oil industry, but to the families of the men who perished. Their bodies were never recovered, and all that remained was wreckage floating in the icy Atlantic. The disaster served as a sobering reminder of the immense power of the ocean and the dangers of offshore drilling in extreme conditions. The Ocean Ranger disaster was a wake-up call for the offshore drilling industry. Investigations revealed multiple safety failures, including inadequate emergency training, design flaws, and the lack of manual ballast controls. In response, new regulations were introduced to improve safety standards on oil rigs, ensuring that crews received proper training for emergency situations. The tragedy also led to the creation of the Ocean Ranger Families Foundation, which provided support to the grieving families. Despite these changes, the disaster remains one of the deadliest oil rig accidents in history, a chilling reminder of the risks faced by offshore workers. The sinking of the Ocean Ranger was a tragic reminder of the dangers faced by offshore oil workers. It exposed critical flaws in rig design, training, and emergency preparedness, leading to changes in industry safety regulations. Though the 84 men aboard were lost to the sea, their legacy lives on through improved safety measures and the Ocean Ranger Families Foundation, which continues to support their loved ones.